Firefighters and community leaders paused to remember the events of 9/11 23 years ago today, showing a unified promise to never forget the terror attacks that forever changed our nation. Good evening, I'm Laura Lee.
And I'm Dan Wolf. Thanks for joining us. First responders from across the region gathered in Duluth today for a ceremony honoring the heroes of 9/11. 343 firefighters lost their lives trying to save people from the Twin Towers, and many more suffered from long-term health complications from that tragic day. And Northern News Now's Rob Coles explains how generations are coming together in the Twin Ports to remember those who came before.
Song, silence, and stairs. Honoring lives lost on a day Americans will never forget.
Time to remember, and like I said, a time of reflection. Why I became a firefighter, why I aspired to do what I did in the service. It makes me think of how can I do better? How can I do better for the next generation?
Honoring lives lost on a day Americans will never forget. Duluth Fire Chief Sean Crochet was one of many firefighters walking the stairs of AMSOIL Wednesday, commemorating the journey taken by the FDNY on 9/11. 110 flights, 2,200 steps.
It's the amount of steps that the firefighters took when the buildings collapsed.
For Crochet, it's an opportunity to look back to the past and forward to the future.
It makes me think of how can I do better? How can I do better for the next generation?
A generation of firefighters that includes his daughter, a probationary firefighter in Duluth who walked with him.
To be here and to remember them, to support this entire career, all of the brothers and sisters around the entire country is super important to me.
The commemoration began with a moment of silence at 8:46 a.m., the same time a hijacked plane struck the first tower, and a ceremony with city leaders.
We remember the heroes, firefighters, police officers, and everyday citizens. Their actions remind us that even in the darkest moments, there is light in the form of human compassion and bravery.
Honoring sacrifices made decades ago, one step at a time. In Duluth, Rob Coles, Northern News Now.
Rob, thank you. As part of the ceremony, Mayor Reinert also honored military members, especially those from our area who were called to active duty after the 9/11 attacks.
The Superior, Duluth, and Grand Lake Fire Departments, members of the 148th and Lake Superior College's firefighting program were among those taking part in today's climb.